We are joined today in the corner booth by E.B. Hauk, an independent author who is going to tell us a lot about their journey of self-publishing. E.B., welcome to the corner booth. Thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity.
I am very, very excited to find out more about self-publishing, about indie, and I'm going to ask all the questions about what you do, how you do it, what your methods are. It's great. I'm excited.
Yeah, it's something that we really don't talk much about, and it's something that we are starting to consider more because we know that the audience is also considering it. Tim and I have gone on record as really not being, probably in the mind frame of going outside of traditional publishing. But I have actually self-published other books that are kind of how-to. If you look up Winning Flag Football, you'll see like 5 or 6 different books that I wrote about a dozen years ago or so that were specific on how to coach flag football and that sort of thing. And I really enjoyed the experience of self-publishing. I haven't quite worked up the nerve to do that with my fiction. So I'm really interested to kind of get the sense of your journey and how you arrived at self-publishing as the aim. So why don't you tell our listeners just a little bit about yourself?
All right. Well, I will say my first foray into writing really came out of the play-by-post role-playing scene. For those of you that aren't familiar with that, essentially this was something that started to bubble up, I think, in the 90s and early 2000s. And it is these sub-forums on things like JSync and the now closed Acorn Rack and the long closed Avid Gamers and Pro Boards. And these are essentially little miniature forums ranging between, I don't know, maybe a dozen to a couple of hundred people, usually organized around a fandom like Harry Potter or whatever. And you can go there and you can sometimes play canon, sometimes make your own characters. And I thought that that was the perfect place for me to begin to develop my craft, because you have a lot of people who are passionate in that shared fandom, and there isn't really pressure for it the way there is with your original work. So it can be a good foundation for just getting into that habit and learning how to see the world from a different perspective.
And so you naturally converted that into straight fiction writing. How did you kind of make that turn?
I was thinking about it for a while, actually, but I came out of a background where I was basically told, even though I was interested in writing from a young age, that there's no money in that. You shouldn't even pursue it, kind of thing. But some of my partners on these writing sites told me that they thought I was really good and I should consider publishing. And after hearing that, like, I don't know, 4 or 5 times, I finally started to think, maybe I should.
And so did you try to go through a traditional publishing model at all, or did you look at the landscape and say, I think I'm going to do this myself through self-publishing?
I did try the traditional model. One thing I would recommend for anyone, just anyone that's interested in writing, is to go to the subreddit for self-published authors. I think it's just called self-publish or self-publishing. They have a ton of resources, primarily for the indie community, but also for people that are interested in sending out query letters. And I went through that route, looked through, is it called Query Manager? There are a couple of different query services, and I must have sent out 60 query letters and I didn't get anything back. It got discouraging. I got a couple of rejections, but they were the boilerplate kind. So after that, I decided I would forge my own road ahead into the writing scene. from everything that I have read or heard authors talked about, really in the last 20 to 30 years, we've seen this massive shift on the publishing side of things where there's more and more emphasis on the author already having a platform of some kind, being a celebrity, social media influencer, or writing a lot to existing market. And a lot of the stuff I write is niche and kind of genre straddling. And because there isn't a big market for that, I think that's part of why it didn't go anywhere. I don't know.
That's pretty interesting. We've been talking about that a lot lately, about this idea that it's not enough just to be a creative anymore. You need to be in all of these other realms to where you're an entire business of one, taking care of all of these things, aside from trying to figure out how to make that narrative hook a little bit hookier, you know?
Yeah, I would completely agree with that. I've been to some conventions like Origins, and I've talked to people at the authors' tables there, and sometimes they'll do panels about writing. And even for people that are traditionally published, they're saying more and more of the onus is on the author to have that presence, to do the marketing, even when you're first starting out, to get the draft as good as possible. So even taking on more of the editing end yourself. And it, in many ways, it seems like unless you're already an established personality, it might just be the smarter investment to go self-published.
So, who did you end up using as far as the service that you sort of went out and found in order to do this self-publishing?
Most of my work I have taken care of on my end. I have had some assistance from a few different sources. I would say get yourself a writers group. They are essential. Having a group of other writers, they're just going to give you more honest feedback than your friends and your family. Hopefully your friends and your family can be honest enough with you to say, hey, this sucks. This doesn't work. You're going to need to rewrite this. I don't understand what's going on. But with other writers, because they're already in the craft, they're going to hopefully have a better idea of how your novel can be improved or where it's failing. So shout out to that. As far as services and such, I would really recommend BookFunnel. That's something I got introduced to through that self-publishing Reddit. It will cost you money. I will warn people that. But through BookFunnel, you can join these promotions of free books. Sometimes they're free short stories. Sometimes they are sample chapters for a book that you're going to be releasing. But because sometimes dozens or several dozen different authors will join these promos, everyone does a little bit of the marketing, and that helps with exposure. It'll help build your audience, because if you integrate it with a mailing list service, you then have people that were at least interested enough in your work to sign up for a sample, and you can start the marketing end there.
I'd like to go back to to you mentioning reading groups. We also have heard a lot from authors about how important it is to have other people read your work and finding that right person. How did you get involved with the writing groups that you have now or have had? Did it stem from that early work on those sites that you mentioned earlier?
No, actually. Without revealing too much about myself, I will say that a member of my extended family is also a writer. She has a little bit of an established presence through the self-publishing scene. And we reconnected about a year ago now. And she invited me to one of these writers groups. She's part of 3 actually, but she recommended one specifically to me. And I really vibe with the people there. We're kind of a multi-generational group, which I appreciate as well, because you have different perspectives from people that are 20, 30, 40 years older than me. Um, I will say for people, this is a thing that's kind of notorious about writers groups. They do tend to trend a little bit older. So sometimes you'll make references that will fly over people's heads, and it's not because you wrote something badly, it's just because they have no idea.
One of the things that I'm most curious about, and actually what you're saying is tracking with what a lot of other authors have been telling us. So I think it's really encouraging to hear people who are venturing out into the publishing world having similar experience and being able to relay that back to folks who are just maybe beginning their journey or maybe are in the soup and they're struggling. But the actual service that did the layout for your book, did you do your own layout for your book? Or did you have somebody else do that for you?
For my first two novels, yes. I ended up just using LibreOffice and kind of off brand Word, and you can use that to export as a PDF. You can use that in connection with another free program called Caliber to convert it to an EPUB. That was a lot of work. I still might do it for a PDF just because the program that I have transitioned to, Atticus, it's a good program, but some of its automated formatting that it does just isn't quite as clean looking as what you can do yourself. But I would still highly recommend it to anyone that can't afford Vellum. Atticus is a little bit cheaper. It also is available to Windows users, and it will take care of both the PDF formatting for your paperbacks and hardbacks and your ebook formatting.
It really sounds like you have a high level of technical acumen, that you can pick up different programs, utilize them effectively, produce quality product. Is that fair to say?
Well, that's a little bit flattering in my opinion, but
Okay.
sure, I can go with that.
That's so well, then I have flattered you. I'm happy to do so. No, but I do think that there's probably a whole set of individuals who maybe don't feel comfortable enough to take on that burden in addition to actually, writing the darn thing. So
Mhm.
I wonder, did you explore any white glove services where, here's an opportunity. I've got a book. I don't know what to do with it next. Here's a press that can help me out. One of the things that Tim and I have been exploring through some of our interviews is really the spectrum from traditional publishing all the way out to self-publishing, and that weird point in the middle, that hybrid publishing. So I just want to kind of pull at the edges of that. And just very quickly for our listeners, traditional publishing really is, that standard querying of the big five, and then Simon and Schuster looks at your manuscript and says, yes, we think we can sell this, so we want to buy the rights to that. And then they take on all of the cost for marketing and production of the book, et cetera. And then on the other end of that spectrum, that self-publishing side, where really you're an army of one, and you are producing the work, you're doing the marketing plan, all the editing, everything that goes into it is you. And then I guess that middle part would be more collaborating with a press to do some of that, but they're still out of pocket on your end. So if you could give us just an idea of how you looked at that entire landscape and sort of what decisions made you settle on the choices that you've made so far?
Well, I wish I could say that I had an opportunity to explore some of those white glove services, especially the marketing end. I will say one of the authors that I kind of peripherally know, at least through her work, is Lois McMaster Bujold, and she calls marketing flogging. And I completely agree with that. If I could just wash my hands of marketing entirely, I would be so much happier. But the reality of my experience is I'm very limited by budget. So I thought to myself, well, I can do research into these programs. I can teach myself what I need to know and go from there. And that's mostly been the whole of my experiences. All of my writing so far, the formatting, even the book cover design, I've done myself just because I don't really have a lot of financial wiggle room.
That makes sense. And so let's pivot now to the actual promotion of the book, actually growing your readership. That's probably the thing that for me is most daunting. If I were to go in a self-publishing direction, I wouldn't have the first idea of how to sort of reach out to the right kinds of readers. And you're saying that, your novels are kind of genre straddling. So does that make it easier to find people because you have one foot in two different genres, or does it make it tougher because you're only marketing to that overlap in the Venn diagram?
Oh, that's a great question. I guess for like full scientific accuracy, I would need to write a normal book and see how that does in comparison. But I've found that just going the book funnel route of joining promotions of similar genres generally works. I get a decent conversion rate. For people that are interested in exploring that, basically you'll just want a pretty good cover, make sure it's eye-catching, hopefully somewhat genre appropriate, and get a good blurb. And the average conversion rate, meaning how often your clicks on your book actually become a download, is about 15%. I do better than that, but I also just wanted to cite that figure so that if people try that and they see that their conversion rate is only around 9 or 10%, not to be discouraged, because there's room for them to grow as they fine tune their process. And that's still not that far off from the average. As far as other aspects of promotion, there are various book promotion sites that you can also find on that self-publishing Reddit, but I can mention a few. Bargain Booksy, Free Booksy, Robin Reads, e-reader News Today, Fussy Librarian, and there are some genre-specific ones. Most of the ones I just listed there, they'll take pretty much everything, but there's Red Feather Romance exclusively for romance authors. There is Book Adrenaline for thriller, mystery, suspense authors, and there's Book Barbarian for fantasy sci-fi. I have used Book Barbarian to pretty good success, just because I'm kind of in that niche. But I will also say your results will vary a lot. When I've tried and I've had fewer reviews on my books, those will not lead to sales as much. So my highest recommendation is try to get reviews. There are some services I can go into on that end, but just do what you can, get those reviews, and then consider going on the promotional end of things.
You talked about blurbs, and we've talked about those a lot in the corner booth. And I'm just kind of wondering about your experiences with that, saying that you need to have a few in order to help promote the book. How did you come by yours, if you don't mind sharing? And you talked about perhaps some services that may do that.
So as far as blurb writing goes, I have seen suggestions to go for 2 to 3 paragraphs, generally recommended between about 100 and 200 words. That's probably right. However, I also feel that everyone's attention span is getting worse and worse. So if you can break it up into smaller paragraphs and just try to get it as punchy as possible, introducing your character and ideally kind of conveying the tone of the novel. Like if your novel has a comedic element, maybe making sure that your blurb is a little tongue-in-cheek. This is really your opportunity to present the book, and in order to get readers that are going to like it, you want to give them a good idea of what is being sold, really. So I just refined. I would recommend looking at other successful blurbs and just doing research online. As far as the other end of getting reviews, that is, I won't lie, that's the most difficult part. There are
I feel like you just having that sigh as you said it kind of told us everything that we would need to know about.
it is a complete hassle. Now, for romance authors, I am really jealous of you guys out there because it seems like it's so much easier for you, because I think 50% of the book market falls between romance and thriller, mystery, suspense. So if you're in one of those two genres, it might be a lot easier for you. A lot of these ARC review services, which ARC stands for Advanced Reader Copy or Advanced Review Copy, a lot of them cater mostly to a romance-heavy crowd. I have tried Book Sirens. I have tried Hidden Gems. I have tried Voracious Readers Only. There are a couple of others that I have tried, and it's really hard to get any traction. And even when you do get traction, some of them boast a review rate of like 80%. Well, maybe that 80% is for all of those romance authors out there, because I was not noticing that same review rate. I was lucky to get a couple of reviews from each of those services. What I have found works the best is this service called Bookroar. And Bookroar, it's almost like a Secret Santa review in a way. What you do is you sign up for it, you fill out information about your book, and then you choose a book to review from a review pool. When you choose a book from that pool, it disqualifies that author from then reviewing your book. So you're not doing a review exchange, which is a no-no for Amazon. But when you do that review, it gives you a credit. So then your book is in circulation in that pool, and someone else then has to review your books. And because of that encouragement to get those credits, people will be doing some reviews.
Do you find that those reviews are in-depth or potentially inauthentic, or are they really good looks at what that reader liked or didn't like about the book? I'm just curious about the quality of those reviews.
It's a mixed bag. I will say it definitely seems like there are people that read the book in full that will comment more on the themes present. There are some people that I think probably read about 20 pages or so and then read the rest of the reviews and cobbled something together. So that is a risk. I won't lie there. I wouldn't say rely too heavily on Bookroar, but just for those crucial initial couple of reviews, I would say maybe consider it, plus your friends and family.
I'm definitely going to have my mom review my books. That's going to be the best.
It's going to be awkward when she pans it, though. So
Yeah, I know it's going to be.
make sure you do it after Christmas.
Just my mom just sort of the pull quote being, "I've made better mashed potatoes than my son's made books."
That is a real risk. That extended family member I told you about, who's also in the writing scene, she gave the books out to everyone in the family, and some people in the family didn't like her book so much, and even as a family member only gave her about 3 stars, and that led to some awkward tension, I can tell you that.
Oh my.
I gave you 2 stars for making that casserole you did 3 years ago, not for the book.
That's right.
Yeah.
You only brought napkins, 1 star.
And of course, even with them, you have to worry about, is that an honest review? Are they just being nice because they want to be able to look you in the eye and not have that awkward wall between you because you put your heart and soul into this work and they just really weren't feeling it?
Reviews do seem to be very important to drive consumer behavior. Do you agree with that?
Unfortunately, yes.
Yeah. So it does seem to be one of those necessary evils, but I think reviews can be fantastic, especially if you start to build a critical mass. What do you think is that magic number of reviews after which people start to go, oh, well, this book has X number of reviews. Maybe I should take a peek at this.
I don't think that there is a hard number. I would say you want at least 10 before you start to do any promotional stuff.
Okay.
That is the bare minimum I would recommend. You're going to see much more success the more reviews that you get, but every person is unique. I know, unfortunately, I am very guilty of if I'm shopping for a product and I see that it only has 12 reviews, I'm probably not going to go for it. Now, that's not books. With books, of course, you can hopefully read a sample before you commit to buy. But I know just from the way that I behave with regards to other things, I am sure that people will see, oh, you have less than 100 reviews, or maybe even you have less than 1,000 reviews and aren't going to go for it. But there's certainly a scalable result. And just from the research that I have done, some authors have said that it really starts to change for them when they have 50 reviews on a book, another say 100 reviews. So I would say tentative sweet spot, but who knows?
Yeah, no, that's fair. I mean, it probably is a case by case thing. One of the things that would be concerned about if I chose to go self-publishing is I'm not 100% convinced that I would be a good arbiter of quality control on my own work. And that's why I was really encouraged to hear you say get a big reader group and, really lean on other people. However, we didn't talk about the editing process as far as like getting the manuscript finished and sort of how it gets produced. But I think that's the thing that really would keep me from doing it, is that I would be concerned that it hadn't gone through enough of an editing cycle. Did you get an external editor involved, or did you handle all of that yourself?
With my writers group, I did get some line editing done from them. We have a few people in that group who are really good at just presenting their writing in the clearest way. I think I'm a decent enough prose writer, but I am certainly guilty of sometimes having strange syntax. I can go Germanic with it for some reason. I don't know if that's an Ohio thing, but sometimes I do need my sentences tightened up just to make them a little bit more clear. But I am the writers group's primary developmental editor. So I don't know if that is a point of success, if that means that everyone thinks I have good story ideas. I do find in my reading process, I am usually my harshest critic. I can usually see, well, this character needs to be strengthened here. Their motivation needs to come across earlier. I need to go back into earlier scenes in order to foreshadow some of that later stuff. So on that end, I do most of my heavy lifting. And I often find that I will notice continuity errors or flub ups that other readers will not notice. So I think it really just depends on the quality of your writers group.
As far as the writing process itself, I love documentaries that show artists in their spaces, in their studios, in their workshops. What is that like for you? Do you have a pretty good routine down? Are you someone that just, hey, I've got the idea right here while I'm waiting for my bacon, egg, and cheese? I'm going to write a couple sentences down. How does it work for you? What works best, do you find?
For me, as far as the idea stage goes, that is just chaos all the time. I will be walking down the hallway and get an idea. And I have so many of them, in fact, that it becomes hard to stay on one project because I'll end up getting excited for another project that just popped into my brain. And then I have to try to sequester that muse away from my existing project's muse so that I can finish what I'm working on. And I usually find, unfortunately, I can stick to a schedule for a couple of weeks before an event comes along that completely upends my schedule. And I was kind of in a groove until this last month. I think that writers that can consistently stick to a schedule are pretty rare. I think everyone struggles at some time or another, but my biggest recommendation would be just making sure, no matter what you do, to write a little bit. And that's why I recommend play by post writing, just because it's low pressure and it helps keep you in that habit.
When you have this inspiration hit you, it's funny because I've always mentioned that whenever I get a new idea and I'm very excited about it, I tend to use that as an excuse not to have to do the heavy lifting of
Mm-hmm.
rewriting or editing an old piece. You know, I don't want to go
Mm-hmm.
back to that work. I want to keep staying in this sandbox phase where I'm just playing with stuff. So when do you have a very specific moment that, like, how do you tune into that gut instinct that tells you that something's finished, that you're like, I think I've had enough input from the readers group. I think it's ready to go. What is that like for you?
Oh, unfortunately, I don't. I think it's called 6 Days to Air. Have you guys seen that documentary?
No.
So that's actually about the South Park team. Trey Parker is the primary creative force on South Park, and he said that he had to start making these episodes release within a week, because if he didn't, he would just pick the writing to death. And I am very, very guilty of that. I will know when something is probably good enough to be released, but then I will see a sentence or two and be like, well, that could be worded better, couldn't it? And if I had my own way, I would probably just edit something until all the life and soul is drained out of it, but it's technically perfectly correct. And no one wants to read that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I just got an anthology from a lit mag that I was very lucky to be in. And I opened it up, and of course, I looked for my piece first. And I looked at it and I was like, this? Wait a minute. Why didn't I take that out? Wait a minute.
Yep.
It's very, oh gosh.
Oh yeah, no, that's a complete thing. I found that, I have a couple of books out now, and I picked up one of them because I was thinking about maybe submitting it for a little indie author contest. I'm sure I won't win, but when I did, I was looking through it and I was like, I thought this was good enough to publish. Really? I mean, all I can see now are the errors, and I could spend, another month just editing. And I try to remember that classic wisdom of don't let perfect be the enemy of good. And you have to let your babies go. You just have to let them fly, because otherwise they're going to be old and in your nest and no one is going to prosper.
Yeah. And it just feels like, for me, when I started writing and sending things out and being fortunate enough to get them published, there was a part of me that was like, oh, wow, maybe I'll be able to conquer this imposter syndrome because I've been published. And then more often than not, I'll look at the thing that was published, and then the imposter syndrome just comes back again. I'm like, this? Wait, no, they shouldn't have done that. Oh, no.
I think that is a constant problem for creatives. I just think that our art is so intrinsic to who we are without necessarily being reflective of our deepest aspects of our personality. It's still something that we are mining ourselves for, our experiences, what we've read and been exposed to, and that makes you want it to be the best it can possibly be. But there's a real danger to editing the soul out of something. It very much happens. And I don't know what the upper limit of edits there should be as far as drafts of edits, but there's definitely an upper limit.
Well, it brings me to a question I had about your most recent novel. Why don't you tell folks about your most recent novel and answer me this question. How long did it take you to go from concept to the completion of your first draft?
So, my most recent novel, I had the idea for that back in February, but I was finishing another book at the time. So, again, your new idea distracting you from your existing projects. I managed to finish that other book, but by then I had already written about 10,000 words of this newest one. Then I started working on it in earnest, I want to say in April was when that finally got real legs. And then it was out by August 31st. It's easy. It's a short little novel, only about 50,000 words. Because it's a comedy, I get to go completely crazy with it. The thing that helps me keep momentum is writing more character-driven pieces. I generally have an outline of a plot in mind, but I find that I most enjoy writing when my characters surprise me. And then if you do a character-driven piece, it's probably for the best not to go too heavy into the outline anyway, because your characters will probably not do what you originally thought they were going to do, and then you just have to follow their lead.
Let me just make sure I heard that right. Are you saying that you went from idea to finished draft between April and August of the same year?
Yes, and
Wow.
edited.
Oh, and edited.
Wow.
So it was produced and like pushed out into the world in that time?
Yep.
Oh, wow. Okay, that's very aggressive.
Excuse me. I'm just going to go over here and cry for a second. If you'd give me just, I'll be right back.
Yeah, I might take that time to work on a couple of short stories.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I think a lot of it is just that role-playing background. If you can get in the habit, it really becomes a lot easier. So much of it is just making sure you're in the habit. And before I even wrote my first novel, I must have written maybe a couple of millions of words on play by post. So I will say my experience might not be indicative of the average indie author's experience.
Well, also, I think, last year, Art and I were talking a lot about NaNoWriMo, and I feel like with that, if you're trying to complete 50,000 words in a month's time, it sort of feels like it does get you into the habit. So when personally speaking, working in the first, like, let's say week of that, you're just like, this is insane. Like, what was I thinking? But by the end of the month, the habit and the muscle has been worked so much, and it so becomes part of everything that you're doing that even when you're not writing, you're getting excited about it because you're thinking about it so much that it starts attacking you at different points when you're doing the dishes or when you're walking the dog or when you're talking to someone else and should be paying attention to them, but actually thinking about how you're going to, kind of get Act 3 started. So it does seem like that is what you have kind of done. You've kind of been working so much with the play-by-post that it sort of has developed that muscle for you to be fully in, correct?
Yeah, I would say that's absolutely true. And I will say, even sometimes it can be a little bit hard for me. I find that if I go a few days or a week without writing just because, life happens, it can be hard to get back up on that bicycle and gain momentum. So my general recommendation, and this is advice I need to follow myself, is be kind to yourself, set very achievable goals and scale it up. Start with maybe I'm going to write 100 words today, and then keep building up until you're in whatever your goal might be, whatever is realistic for your schedule. And even Terry Pratchett, he wrote entire books on, I think it was 250 words a day. So just do realistic goals for you and do whatever you will have fun with, because as soon as the habit becomes stressful, then you're probably going to start second guessing yourself and your entire work and avoid what you're doing. And that's just going to slow down whatever you need to get done.
Yeah, or pick something else to do, like design board games. Yes, I
Yes.
fully understand. Well, I want to make sure that our listeners know where they can find your work. What's the best way to find the books that you have out there?
I would say you can go to my website, ebhauk.com. That is ebhauk.com. And you can sign up for my newsletter there. I am primarily on Amazon right now. So you can just search for my name on Amazon. I will probably be expanding out, but if you get in on my newsletter, you can see short stories and such that are otherwise not available, and hopefully get alerted to whatever my next work is going to be.
Outstanding. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, EB. I think we've learned a lot about your journey in self-publishing and have really given folks a lot of potential tools and resources and different approaches that they could take if they're deciding to do their own self-publishing.